Okay, this is part 3 of the review for test number 2, chapters 4 and 5 in micro and macroeconomics. And this is the demand and supply in financial markets. And so in our financial markets, we have to look at who's demanding, who's supplying, what perspective are we looking from, because there's two kind of perspectives I think of in the financial market. And we have to figure out who are the demanders, who are the suppliers. Okay, so we know in the financial market we're dealing with banks, right? Definitely. And we know that we're dealing with consumers. Either we are going to be borrowing from the banks, let's say, or we're going to be depositing into the banks. And it makes a difference whether we're demanding money or supplying money. That's kind of the way you can think about it. So if there's, like I wrote down here, we've got lenders and borrowers, we've got savers and banks. So these kind of go together. So if we're borrowing money from the bank, let's say, okay, you can borrow from other places too, but we're just going to talk about banks right here. If we're borrowing money from the bank, are we demanding money from the money supply, or are we putting money into the money supply? Well, if we're borrowing, we're saying we need money. Okay, we want to buy something, or I want to go to school, or whatever it is. So we're demanding money. Give it to me, give it to me, give it to me. We're demanding. So on the other side of it, the bank, they're supplying us with the money. So in that case, the bank is the lender. So the lender is always the supplier of money in the financial market, okay? Now, if we look at it from the other perspective, the second perspective, we as people, households, if we've got extra money, we want to save that and invest it, right? So when we put money into a bank, are we a supplier or demander of money in the financial market? We're a supplier, right? We're giving banks our money to use for a period of time. And banks, in this case, they'd be the demanders. They're like, we need your money. That's how we stay in business, is by getting your money so we can lend it out. We see advertisements for different banks, things like that. So they would be the demanders when they're asking for money to come in. Because without our money as depositors or savers, they can't loan that money out. When we put money in the bank, we expect that they're going to pay us some interest, a rate of return on our money, because they're using our money, okay? If we lock it into a CD for a certain period of time at a certain interest rate, we know what we'll get back. And the bank knows how much money they have to loan out to other people. And at an interest rate, they need a rate of return too, okay? So it's all intertwined, just like that circular flow model over there. It all has to keep going. So when we put money in the bank, right now we might get like 4%, okay? As a depositor, we're supplying money. The bank, on the other hand, when they loan it out, they're going to be loaning it out at like 7 or 8% probably. So does that seem equitable? No, but there's a reason. The banks have to make a profit margin in order to stay in business. And it has happened that banks have gone out in the past. Okay, maybe like in the mid-'80s, that was a real rough time for banks because agriculture was having such a hard time. And so they made some loans that they weren't able to collect. And if they couldn't collect loans, when these people, the depositors, when they said, hey, it's time for our money, if they didn't have enough money to give back, well then banks have a difficult time. It's all got to stay in balance. But thinking of which side of the equation each party's on as to whether they're demanding or supplying. Okay, and so here is a graph that shows the demand, and I'm trying to read what this is saying. Rate of return, that's your interest rate, rate of return, profit, whatever you want to say. Here's quantity in billions of dollars. And so on the demand side, it's the borrowers, and on the supply side, it's the lenders. So the banks are the suppliers, the individuals who are borrowing are the demanders, okay? And the same rules apply for surplus, for shortages, okay? Again, read this in detail, look at everything as it relates up to that, okay? Okay. And that was on page 97. And there's the chart. You always have to have your data to build your graph. The graph just represents it visually. Okay, so law of demand, law of supply, all apply in the financial market as well. Okay, equilibrium in financial markets, wherever that crosses. We can have surpluses, we can have shortages. Sorry, I was thinking about the next thing. So we can also have shifts in demand and supply in the financial market. And that shift is an actual movement of the line, not just a movement along the line because of a change in price, but an actual shift, okay? In our housing market, we may have a shortage of homes, which we do in Colby, Kansas here, because the demand is higher than the number of homes or apartments that are available. I experienced it when I moved here. I was trying to find an apartment before the school year started. It was very, very difficult. There just weren't many available. Because of a shortage, that causes the price to go up, okay? But there are shifts that can happen in the financial market that are not just price related, but availability related and things like that. Like during COVID, my neighbors who had moved from Colorado, they'd saved up almost $1 million, and they wanted to build this wonderful house out in the country north of Hayes to be near family and everything. COVID hit, lumber supply was so limited. There became a huge shortage of lumber, like to build a house, and the price just like doubled. So could they continue with the building of their home right then? No. They had to wait a couple years, and then when the prices came back down somewhat, like if they started here and went up here, they only came down to about here. But that was still allowed them to build their house. So we can see that. Is the United States government a borrower? Huge, like $5.1 billion per day on average that the government is borrowing, and I don't know how long that is sustainable. Great graphs on page 100 with great descriptions, okay, looking at a shift in supply to the left. So you can see how that affects your equilibrium quantity and rate of return. Price ceilings, we talked about the usury laws with limiting, the laws limit the amount of interest somebody can charge. Okay, you can see there's a graph there. On page 102, efficient mechanism for information, read through all of that, because it talks about like substitutes and that. Okay, so that finishes up chapter 4, okay?